It's funny sitting up here and listening to you guys because then I change everything. Like while you're talking, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll change this or that. Or so now it's going to be random. I'm so sorry about that. So I've never been involved in any kind of politics before. I was in the industry for a while, and then I left, and now I represent NASCAD, and I go and recruit for Nova Scotia all over the place. But I still have incredible connections with the film industry and AFCOOP and all the arts and the indies. So when this went down, it was like a series of events that kind of just made me more and more resolved to just keep going. And so it was very interesting for me to see that come out of myself, because I know what's right and wrong, but I never, like if you had told me 2 months ago that I would be reading a letter at the Province House, I would have laughed. I was like, what are you talking about? And then it happened, and it was like, because I was starting to find this resolve in me, because this was wrong and it offended me on a very visceral level, like to watch it, and everything that was happening was confirming it over and over and over. So that's what happened. And honestly, Mark, the first thing was you walking out of that room, and I watched that video, and you could see the reporters just barraging you with questions, and as you're trying to answer them, you can see your face. Like it's like you're, like that's how I interpret it, was you were watching, you realized how like this was not good. And we don't know each other well, but I've known you forever. And to see someone I know and care about, like have that on camera was like, it was really like that's the image I see through this whole thing, was that. And then there were other things like Nelson, and they just kept, like every time I turned around, it was someone I knew. And this is something that was really struck me, and I wish somebody would do this, like create something that compared the two, is every time I saw anyone I knew speaking, they were sincere and clear and well-spoken, and there was no spin or anything to it. They were just talking from the heart. And then you'd compare it to these sort of robotic, repetitive speeches on the other side, and I was just kind of dazzled that it didn't seem like people were noticing that. Like you could pick anybody at the rally and they could talk about this, like in the crowd, and just have a real opinion and say it well. And then on the other side, it was just like, repeat what you were told or whatever. Like it was really surprising to me. And so as I was watching all of my friends, like I remember one night with some friends who weren't in film talking, and I said, this is crazy. Literally 80% of my Facebook friends, their lives are falling apart. And I'm watching it on, like, it's insane. And then one of my friends who has liberal connections, she's like, oh, well, you gotta be tight with your budget. And it was just such this moment where I was like, what are you talking about? You've hung out with these people. Like, these are real people. So as these things were happening, I was just getting more and more resolved about the whole thing. But I'm in a unique position where I'm not in the industry, but I have lots of ties with it. And so I just started voicing my thoughts on the internet, like as most people do on Facebook, and just saying stuff. And then I wrote this one where it was like, this is why everybody else should care, because I didn't think that was really being understood. And I thought I was just talking to like everybody who already knows everything, like everybody who's all on the same page. And that one post got shared 650 times, and that told me that people did want to understand. So then I took it more seriously after that. Like when I was writing, I was like, okay, this is what it means to other people. And so it kept going, and the rally was happening and all of these things. And people were talking about the Law Amendments Committee, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a good person who should go speak. That's another great person, never considering that that was something I should do. And because these people were very well spoken and very public and all these awesome things. And then the day before, somebody had posted again, there's still spots left. And it was really interesting because, like I said, I would have laughed if you had said that this was gonna happen. And I was sitting there at work, and I was just like, this is the first time I've ever felt this. It was like, I have to do this. It was like this gut imperative, like whether, no matter how nervous I was or how afraid I was going to do this. And that was really surprising for me to find that in myself. It sounds stupid, but it was just kind of like this, all right, I gotta do this. This is the least I can do for these people. But I was like, well, what's my approach? Because I knew everybody else would be pouring their hearts out in these amazing ways. And they're all film people, so I was like, okay, well, I'll talk about being a recruiter, because my job is to go around outside of Canada, inside of Canada, and talk about how amazing Nova Scotia is and how amazing the art school is, and all of this. So I represent beyond. So that's what I talked about. And honestly, speaking wasn't as hard as listening to other people speak. Like, I sat there for 4 hours, and there were people that I had not seen in 10 years, like who used to do transport or set deck or whatever, and I was listening to them, and it was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, Tim Tracy talking was just about killed me. And so as I was listening to these people, my resolve was just strengthening and strengthening and strengthening. And when I got up there, I wasn't allowed to read the whole thing, because I thought it wasn't wordy, but apparently it was. It would have taken longer, and they were just timing you the whole time. And I just kind of talked to them, the Liberals on the one side, because I knew everybody on this side, they were already in, kind of thing. So I was just here, and I was looking at them, and they were completely polite, but it was interesting because I was looking at people who I knew weren't going to change anything, but I felt it was very important to say. And I continue to think that. I don't care, well, I care, but whatever the decisions continue to be, I'm going to keep talking. And that was interesting to discover about myself too, because it needs to be on record. So talking to them, and watching that and understanding that they were not going to change anything. And the most disappointing part about it is they weren't even going to learn anything. And as I was sitting there, I mentioned the 2008 report, and somebody asked me over there, I can't remember who, because I don't know much about politics, they said, what is that? And I said, the 2008 report is yours. And it says that this is the most, that the film industry is very great for the economy. And to watch them go, oh. And I was like, I expected maybe they wouldn't know a lot 3 weeks earlier, but at that point, they should have learned that. And that was the scariest moment. It was just like, you're not even trying. Like, I was up reading all of this stuff every night, trying to figure out I don't, watching the video with the tax credit and going, okay, how does this work? And like all of this. And to see the people who are actually going to make this decision had not engaged in any of this was really surprising. And I'm kind of naive about that sort of thing. And I was like, wow, you're not even trying to understand this. And so that was a moment. So that furthered my resolve. So after leaving there, I kind of suspected, but being a filmmaker, I believe filmmakers have an internal sort of romantic, tiny spot in their hearts where they always believe the underdog's gonna win and there's gonna be a last minute awesome. And so, and I know you all had it. You knew there was this is, it's Rocky is one of my favorite movies. It was totally gonna happen. Even though I really didn't believe it was gonna happen, but part of me did, kind of thing. So that was another heartbreaker. But the second that I watched online, them saying no, and I watched them all, and I was like, and it was interesting, I thought I'd be really upset, but I wasn't. It was just another heel dug in for me, and I was like, all right, let's do this, kind of thing. So what I've done now is, and I just put it online, is I've created a website where I'm going to list every person that has to leave Nova Scotia with a bio, so they can see it. And not just them, but also communities like Nova Scotia can see. And the bio is about who they are, what their family members are, what they contribute to their community, what they're missing about Nova Scotia, would they come back, how they feel about all of this. And they're being very honest. It's a hard website to maintain as I'm reading these letters, but I'm putting them up slowly, and I know it's going to get bad in the next while. Right now I'm waiting, this is very morbid, but I'm waiting till they actually leave before I put them on, so there's no doubt about the validity of anybody that's on there, because there are people that are selling their houses right now and that sort of thing, so I'm not putting them on until then. So I'm prepared we can do this forever, because I'm going to do it. And it was really surprising for me to discover that about myself, and so that's basically what I'm doing. So.
Question, because one of the things that I found amazing about this decision and issue and outcome is the amount of public support. So there was a change.org petition that like went 35,000 people, right? And it went to 15,000 really quickly. Letters to the editor. I remember walking in the farmer's market, like it was the issue everybody was talking about and feeling really awful about. So I'm just curious, like from those of you who are in the industry or supporters, how did you feel about that public support? And did you feel like it was helpful, or did you feel like it couldn't move things in the direction that it needed? Anyway, there was the support, but it still wasn't changing things. I'm just curious as to how you felt about that.
Is it open for the whole group?
Oh, yeah.
In a way, it was overwhelming. It was like a tidal wave, and it was, you kind of, you couldn't help but get swept up in it. There's a part of us, I think for some of us though, those of us who work in the industry, we're kind of like, well, yeah, because we do have really deep, far-reaching roots in this province. And I wrote a position paper for the Broughton Tax Regulatory Review thing last year, and it was one of the things that I took away from that, because I talked to a lot of different stakeholders in the industry, and one of the things I've been doing this I've been here for 20 years working in film, and one of the things I really that brought to light was how deeply rooted we are and how many connections we have to our community because of the type of work that we do. And also because we've been around now for 30 years. I feel like there's been a film industry in Nova Scotia now for 30 years. There are second generation film crew now in Nova Scotia. So in a way it was sort of like, it wasn't surprising, if you will, but awfully frustrating, because, and it goes back to, I guess, just to tie it to what I was talking about, is that you kind of go, well, isn't this how, in a democracy, isn't our decisions supposed to be made based on the public will? Like, if the public will, as you said, you spent 18 months going around the province consulting with people, and then nobody ever said, hey, I think Mr. Steele here wrote this too, like, well, the real problem is the film industry, so nobody really was complaining about it. And here are all these people, after a bunch of misquoted numbers or mistaken numbers and spin that says, well, we cost money, we don't pay tax, etc. People were still kind of like, we still want them around. And we of course refute all of those things, but they still said, well, yeah, we still think this is a good idea. I'll tell, if I can indulge me, I tell a little story. The night of the rally, we kind of, after the rally, everybody was really jacked up, and we went to the shoe shop to eat and drink and a little bit, and the entire shoe shop was like all film industry people. And I looked over, and everybody I know is there, and I looked over, I saw one table, I was like, oh, that's somebody I know, but not from the film industry. It's my old neighbor, and he's a big rugby playing guy he plays rugby. He owns a landscape company, and he was there with his boys, and they had like mounds of meat in front of them, and they had been drinking all day, or I don't know. And he saw me, and he calls me over, and he's like, I'm the biggest redneck there is, and it is not okay if the Trailer Park Boys isn't shot in Nova Scotia. I don't care about you and your hip. Like, he was being facetious, but he's like, and it was, and you kind of think, well, isn't that what is supposed to drive the decision making for a place? Isn't it supposed to be the will of the people?
Well, and I'll just chime in there very quickly and say that it was our only defense against a majority government. It was essential. Like, without that support, that widespread support from across the province, people speaking up. I have to look at it as like really, in the end, like, we had extraordinary support from the opposition parties, from the Progressive Conservatives, the NDP, but and I was very impressed actually at how eloquent they were in the House. But in the end, it's like, the Liberals will do what they're going to do because they're majority. And I think the fact that there was such extraordinary support that came out for us, it meant that they had to take it really seriously. And I know even within the party, like the Liberal Party itself, there were a lot of people who were very upset about this decision. And so the Liberals themselves were facing, extraordinary pressure within their own party, saying there's something very seriously wrong here. And so if we hadn't engaged in the campaign that we had run, then that position would not have been articulated. People wouldn't have stood up and spoken up. But we kind of, in a way, what we were trying to do gave people a platform to speak up and say, this is meaningful to me. So.